Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. Throwaway because my siblings are on Reddit. My dad has always been a very judgmental person. Needless to say, this has impacted the self esteem of my siblings, me, and my mom. But it is only me who has actively made efforts to ever call him out on his toxicity. That, too, has been of no avail because those attempts were always met with arguments, and I was always made to apologize to my dad for the same, for being rude. I was so gaslighted by everyone around me that eventually I was led to believe that all dads were this way and constantly pointing out their children's flaws, making fun of them, and trying to fix them was something completely normal and okay. All throughout childhood and until the end of adolescence, I spent most of my time looking as perfect as I possibly could to feel accepted by my dad's highly unrealistic standards. I believed that I was undeserving of any and all sorts of love, especially one which came from romantic partners, and honestly, I wouldn't really blame any of my partners for being the way that they were with me, constantly detached. I mean, who wouldn't be when I was so detached myself? Thankfully, though, in college, I met Aurelio, who really changed who I was as a person, and that too for good. Aurelio and I began dating in the second year of college, and like I said, we had an amazing bond. We got engaged right out of college, and of course, it was my dad who openly confessed to me that he didn't like Aurelio because he wasn't the same race as us. He would constantly tell me how it would never work out, how he was with me just for the money, yada yada. All the while never accepting the fact that Aurelio's family was in fact richer than us and definitely more stable and accepting. I sort of had enough at that point. Looking at Aurelio's family, I realized that I had a guide to know what was acceptable and what was unacceptable from my family. I used the information that I had gathered, and eventually things started to look so messed up that I had to cut my entire family out of my life. It was a 5 year phase, and regardless of how these people were, I did have a sense of attachment to them, but still. With the newly found strength and support, I was able to cut my family off completely and even get married around that time. I had thought that my family used this period of my absence as a way to reflect their horrible behavior, but nope. That was far from it. And of course, being the emotionally needy person that I was, I really wanted that to be the case so bad. That is why, when my parents found out that I had given birth to my daughter and they reached out to me with apologies, I did not think too much of it. I genuinely believed that they had no malicious intentions behind it. Even Aurelio and his family encouraged me to rebuild a relationship with them, and honestly, during the beginning of it all, it was all bright and blossoms. We were building a great relationship, and within the first year and a half itself, Jasmine pretty much became attached to my parents. If we ever left her with them for babysitting, she would stay there happily. Of course, though, my dad could not handle that, and slowly, amongst the events leading up to this situation, Jasmine started acting a bit off around my family. She no longer enjoyed their company and would simply just stay quiet. Everyone just chalked this up to random things that kids go through, but little did I know the reality behind it was far uglier. Well, you see, my work schedule is pretty odd, and oftentimes I'm called in for one thing or the other on Saturdays. This Saturday was no different. I was called in, and as my parents live closer to me than my in laws, I decided to drop Jasmine off to my parents. I then drove myself to work and went about my day until, out of nowhere, I received a call from my daughter's nutritionist and skin specialist. Now, I was pretty confused as to why the two had called me out of nowhere, especially when I rarely made appointments with them. I returned their calls as soon as I could and was horrified to hear that my dad had not only taken my daughter to the doctors, but also made inquiries about weight loss surgery and some sort of skin color altering surgery. Apparently, according to the doctors, they believed that my dad did not know that the doctors knew who I was. I mean, makes sense because the hospital is pretty far away from where we live. But the audacity that this man has, it's unbelievable, to say the least. I was fuming at this man's ability to be so heartless. I immediately called the cops, letting them know of the entire situation. How my dad, who has no guardianship of my daughter, has taken her to the hospital. I too then made my way over to the hospital and called Aurelio on my way. We both rushed to the hospital where the cops separated Jasmine from my dad, and my dad was creating a huge scene, trying to understand why his granddaughter is being taken away from him. I laughed at his face as soon as I got to the hospital, telling him that I really shouldn't have expected any better from him. He seemed stunned because obviously this man thought he was really being slick or something. The cops handed me my daughter and told me that I would need to drive down to the police station to file a report. I thanked them and I simply just left because I knew if I would have stayed there, I would have created a scene. Ever since then, my side of the family hasn't stopped blowing up my phone and giving me grief over the fact that I called the cops on my dad, who was just trying to help. I haven't responded to any of them or even told anyone about this situation because I'm pretty much lost about it all myself. So, Reddit, what should I do here? AITA? I decided to sit down with Jasmine today and talk to her. The conversation was heartbreaking and devastating for both Aurelio and I because we really found out how terrible the situation from the roots. Jasmine, through her tears, talked about how my dad had eventually started making comments about her looks, her weight, her features, and her color. She told me that he had warned her if she ever told me about this all, I would become very angry at her. My heart fell in my stomach. I was tearing up as each word uttered from her mouth. I felt like I had failed her as a mom. It wasn't just me and her crying, though. The fact that Aurelio cried too just made me crumble into pieces. I felt completely lost, like I had failed as a mother. I felt like all the efforts that I ever put to protect my family failed. Even with so much consolation from Aurelio's and his family, I really couldn't and can't forgive myself, at least for now. I'm typing this as we're driving back home from the cops. The cops inform me that I can file a report of this situation, but there isn't much they can do about it currently. I also inquired about a restriction order, and they informed me that it could be put in place if the doctors are willing to give their statement. I have emailed the doctors for the same already, and now I'm just hoping for the best possible outcome. Hi, everyone. The cops finally got the restraining order put in place today, and God bless their hearts for that. I think I feel safe finally after a long time. Not just safe myself, but also safe in terms of my daughter and husband, too. I really feel glad that I have pushed away that monster of a father as far away as I possibly can, along with the family who, till date, claims to love me and talks about trying to ruin my daughter's life because, according to them, that is what is going to ensure a good future for her. Needless to say, I genuinely have started to believe that these people have something really wrong going on with them mentally, and I feel so lucky to say that I am no longer a part of their family. It's not just me, though. So many more of my cousins from my extended side of the family have cut off contact with them after being terrified upon hearing this situation. I know this is not the end of it all. The results of this situation are going to last for a while. And I know it is going to take my family and I a lot of therapy to wash away the stain that this situation has left upon us. In such a dark world, where your own can do so much to bring you down, I can only hope that my daughter does not come across people like my family in her worst nightmares. And even if they do, I hope I will be able to protect her as I have this time to the best of my abilities. Thank you for all your amazing support and comments. NTA, you know your family has always been siding with your dad. So you know they just irrationally side with him. There's no need for you to feel guilty or like you're the a-hole because the only way I see you being the a-hole in this situation is if you don't look after your daughter's well-being. YTA, you need to accept that your dad is the way he is and isn't changing. You don't have to keep trying to explain his behavior. He is no longer your responsibility. Go find your peace and make your daughter your first priority. You don't have to keep giving your dad more victims to your dad to treat like shit. I know how hurtful it is, but you really have to learn to get over it. Backstory. I'm 30 years old. I'm a transgender woman who started their transition at 24. Before my transition, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression. Honestly, I lost count of how many times I had to go to the psych ward. Now that I finally did my medical transition, I don't look male at all. I had intense facial feminization surgery. I wanted no traces of masculine features. Had an 8-hour surgery, also including breast augmentation. Most people around me call me by my chosen name and use the correct pronouns. Some family members don't do that. When they do call me by my dead name, I always ignore them. Well, a few weeks ago, my family and I went on a trip to see family. While there, my dad reconnected with old friends from high school. While they were chatting and catching up, I brought them beers and a snack. I've never seen my dad so happy and excited. While I was there, he asked me to get my brother so they can meet us. He introduces my brother as his youngest son and me as his oldest son. My brother goes and shakes their hand because it's a polite thing to do, and my dad is extremely strict on that. I simply just walked away without shaking their hand and not even saying hi. My dad was mad and scolded me after they were gone. He said that I embarrassed him because of my attitude. I yelled at him that I was not his son and that his oldest son is completely dead. So, am I the a-hole for walking away? So, first of all, thank you so much for all the love and support, as well as all the transphobic people in my comments and DMs. You know what they says. Bad publicity is good publicity. So I know most people keep saying to go LC or NC. I wish I could. I made a comment where I said that even though he misgenders me and dead names me, he's been a great dad. Ever since my social transition at 19, he's expressed his love and complete support. He's even gone as far as buying me makeup. He FaceTime me and tells me, "Is this something that you like? Would you like me to buy it?" The only issue is that he continues to constantly misgender me and dead names me, especially in social settings. I think it's time to have a serious talk and tell him how it makes me feel when I am misgendered and dead named. I've been avoiding family therapy, and I think it's time. I think it's time for my parents to see a therapist so that they can get a better understanding of me and what I'm going through. But I also believe that they desperately need one on one therapy. I want a professional therapist to explain to them that dead name, the old me, is gone. I want the therapist to explain to them how hurtful it is to be dead named and misgendered, how it could be dangerous in a social setting. Thank you all for the wonderful, loving messages and your outstanding support. NTA, he didn't respect you. You could say that he embarrassed you by not acknowledging who you are. If the friend knew you previously as a son, just by saying, "This is my oldest," would have clarified who you are. Adding son in there was just disrespecting you and unnecessary. Walking away was the calmest response you could have had, and I applaud it. NTA, he's introducing you as someone you're not, despite knowing full well that you are a woman and have an entirely different identity than the one he's clinging to. The person he's referencing is long gone. It's called a dead name for a reason. You have every right to walk away from that conversation as well as walk away from him entirely. Look out for yourself. You don't have any obligation to a family that won't acknowledge your choices and transition. Sending comfort. I'm 29, female, and have been friends with Mike, 35, male, for about 2 years now. And recently, he offered to room with me since we're both struggling to make rent. I declined his offer because I felt that it would be hard to live with him. He has some extreme routines that I feel would clash with what I need to get by. He needs the entire house to be dark and deafening silent by 9 p.m. If he gets up during the night and sees even one source of light or non sleeping sounds, he gets really upset and stressed. He wakes up at 5 a.m. and eats a very specific breakfast meal every morning. He eats lunch exactly at 1 p.m. on the dot. And he's very attached to his friends, will literally follow you around and talk your ear off about one of his obsessions. He constantly texts and voice calls me the moment I'm off work. I suffer from CPTSD and have trouble sleeping. I'm usually up at extreme odd hours of the night and sometimes can only sleep when the sun rises. One of the ways I use to fall asleep is leaving the TV on so I can listen to it, like a bedtime story. Along with sleep issues, I also go through random episodes of depression, anxiety, and flashbacks. So when he offered to room with me, I rejected his offer, and when he asked why, I told him what we need to get through the day will cause one another issues. Mike immediately started throwing a tantrum, saying I hurt his feelings and I was an a-hole. He hung up after literally just screaming into his phone. A few hours later, I got a call from his parents accusing me of being an a-hole and how disappointed they were in me for being discriminatory towards their autistic son. They said they thought I would be a good friend to him, but clearly I'm just as judgmental as everyone else, and they ended the call by wishing I get what I deserve. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words and helping me understand autism just a bit better. As of right now, I think it's safe to say Mike and I most likely won't be friends anymore. His parents started texting me, demanding I stop by and apologize to him and to discuss compromises for rooming together. So I told them no thanks, and I'll pretend they didn't just ask that of me. Then they decided to take a jab at my mom being a single mother and failing to raise a good child, so I blocked all their numbers. I'll just take this as a lesson learned and move on, I guess. NTA, and I'm saying this as an autistic woman, your needs clash with his. His autism is irrelevant. And the fact that he threw a tantrum, he needs to understand that, yes, his autism will inconvenience other people sometimes, and he can't force them to put his own needs first. He needs to understand compassion as it applies to subjecting other people to his own habits. And He needs to learn how to handle rejection in a mature manner. Throwing a tantrum and calling his friend, you, names just because she had the forethought to say, hey, our needs will clash, so maybe we shouldn't be roommates, is downright childish. If he doesn't figure these things out, he's never going to go far with close relationships such as roommates or girlfriends. NTA, speaking as an autistic person with CPTSD and many other mental illnesses, being autistic doesn't excuse disregarding others' needs. You made yourself clear in the reason why you declined, which was absolutely reasonable, autistic or not. I wouldn't want to live with someone with differing schedules, especially those that could cause distress to myself or the other person. I have insomnia and similar CPTSD symptoms to you that I sometimes don't sleep till sunrise. I am always up at odd hours. He and his parents are labeling your boundaries, needs, and accommodations as ableist. Yet that's not what it is. In fact, they are the ones being ableist. Mental illness is technically disability. You are allowed accommodations too. Mental illness cannot be fixed, just as autism can't be. They talk about his autism being something so horrible and that everyone should therefore feel sorry for him. Autism is not a horrible thing. This guy has clearly been coddled by his parents to the point of entitlement and no care for others' needs. This tantrum doesn't appear to be an autistic meltdown to me, so I don't feel that word is out of context in this situation. It just appears to be an adult man making a scene because he didn't get his way. You are not in the wrong. You are not an a-hole. He is, and so are his parents. OP, please take care of yourself. You did the right thing. Take some time for you. Keep their numbers blocked, and please know that you did the right thing. NTA, and in the real world, no one is responsible for babysitting anyone. If your personality types will clash, then you made an excellent call. He may be a good friend, but you can't just alter your life and suffer to keep their son from having a meltdown.